And that's where it did its up, down, left, right.
It was moving left, right. Nothing could move the way it moved at the time. Nothing could move that quick.
Well, here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now. Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is unreal.
The Rendlesham Forest incident is become known as Britain's Roswell.
And the movement was very geometric. It was not a normal movement.
Days before the events of Rendlesham Forest, there were sightings witnessed by both military personnel and civilians in the same location.
So I undone the front door of the house and walked out into the yard here where I am now, and stood watching them.
At first, we thought it was just regular aircraft coming in, and we looked over at the runway, waiting for the lights to go on, figuring, well, the aircraft's coming in.
We asked the local people if they'd heard anything and seen anything, and most of the local people said that they'd seen the lights over the forest.
So I looked down the fence line to my right, and I saw an orange glow in the woods.
I couldn't hear any sounds at all. I stood watching them, and they were going up, moving about this way, then that way, then they were going up, and they were coming down. And I sort of watched them for 3/4 of an hour.
It was a big light, and it just stopped. And this guy and I were looking, we noticed that the runway lights aren't on. We see this light. And then all of a sudden it just stops in midair, and then all of a sudden it just moves up, down, left, right, and then it breaks into like 3 pieces and speeds across the runway. And now we're stunned. We're like, what was that?
And when it got even with me, it stopped.
There was a lot of activity on the base. I could hear vehicles running around. I could see the flashing lights of vehicles moving about.
Perplexed, Mr. Harris decided to investigate the lights and began driving toward the forest.
I went round in my van to have a look, and I was stopped going into the forest by an English policeman and a military policeman. They're both together. So I had to turn around and come back.
And it was like an Etch-a-Sketch board. It's like if you were to take something and move it up and move it. The movements were very definitive.
What it was a very bright light illuminating from the forest floor.
The next thing that we saw was the lights in a forest.
Then the lights started appearing, and it was like they were maneuvering between trees.
He's breathing a little heavy, and he says, "Security control, the object is about 150 feet in front of us." And then, it was just a matter of a couple of seconds. He comes back, and his breathing is a little heavier, and he goes, "Security, do you copy that the object is behind us now?" We do our perimeter check, and all of a sudden, on the radio, someone starts yelling, "There's a UFO out here."
Around 3 a.m., Sergeant Jim Peniston was notified of a possible downed aircraft in the forest, and that Airman First Class Ed Kabansag was on his way to collect him. They drove to the East Gate and met up with Staff Sergeant Stevens and Airman First Class John Burroughs. Sergeant Randy Smith and Airman First Class Richard Bertolino, among others, were already at the East Gate observing the lights.
It's not like a light that continually traveled. It didn't have that property of a flashlight or a light bulb that illuminated an area. It almost had a dome quality to it, like it lit a certain area and that was it.
The whole canopy of the forest is got like a white bubble of light over it.
Peniston, Kabansag, and Burroughs began to walk toward the woods to investigate. But because of a treaty with Great Britain, they weren't allowed to have their firearms off base.
They put all their weapons in my vehicle, and I stayed at East Gate and watched while they all went out.
And we went to a place called Bunker Hill because we knew it was the highest point that we could get to on base.
I thought this was a prank. I thought, okay, 3-4 days on with my flight, there's a big, huge mud puddle out here, and they're going to throw me in the mud.
I've had at least 30 or 40 crashes that I have been to at that point in time, and that's definitely what I thought it was.
We had a great triangulation, being on the hill, to them in the woods, to the object, to security control.
Sergeant Penniston told Ed to relay behind him, but as soon as they got deeper into the woods, something changed.
We started walking out into the forest. And when I looked out there was no lights. They were gone. And the forest was pitch black. Almost immediately, we started having trouble with our radios.
I wasn't getting no response at all back from the control center.
They began to feel an electric charge.
All of a sudden, everything was different. There was like an electric charge in the air, like static electricity. Felt like your hair was standing up.
Feel that? Then we could hear farm animals. Whatever was out there, that told me that they were trying to get away from it.
Him and Burroughs pursued what they perceived to be a craft on the forest floor.
They measured approximately 9 feet long, triangular in shape, black glass looking, metal feel, but very, very smooth.
One side of the craft, there was markings on the craft. There were a series of etchings. That's what it seemed like to me, like they're etched in the fabric of the craft.
It was like a blink of an eye. It went from being there to gone, just like that snap.
They finally came back.
You could tell that something happened to him.
And Richard noticed Sergeant Penniston was holding a small notebook.
He was describing some of the situation, and he pulled out this little notebook, and he diagrams what he saw out there. It was kind of diamond-shaped, and he explained that it wasn't like any metal he had ever seen.
After I got up close to the craft, the writing changes. It changes from being written confidently to shaky. Gotta stop there. Sorry. I need a little time. Okay. Wow.
After they drove back to the base, men in civilian clothes were waiting.
There were gentlemen there with sunglasses, and they took Cabansag and Jim Penniston off somewhere. We no longer saw them when we turned in our weapons. I almost felt like, I don't know, I felt kind of betrayed, you know, because they wouldn't even talk to me about it anymore. I mean, we all still got along, but anytime it would be brought up, they just could not talk about it anymore. What was said to them to clam them up so tight, I have no idea.
And I just remember sitting there and all of a sudden seeing this light up in the sky.
Airman Lori Bowen had no knowledge of what happened the night before, and for the first time was stationed at the East Gate for a midnight shift. And around 1 a.m., she saw something.
And it was a multicolored, you know, reds, yellows. It was kind of turning, and it was slowly descending into the Queen's Forest, into Rendlesham's Forest.
Just before Lori's sighting, on the same night, Sergeant Rick Bobo, who served in the WSA Guard Tower, also saw something.
There was a light up in the sky, and just started watching it, and it was kind of green, blue, red, and then it just hung there. It had other lights came down and went down off of it, and it went to the ground. That did. The object didn't that I saw, but something came out of it and went to the ground.
They both heard commotion over their radio frequency, listening to high-level officials speaking quickly in the woods.
I just remember, like, holy cow, there's this thing up in the sky landing, and next thing I know, Trematosi's down at my gate.
And I called it in. Apparently it hadn't been the first time that had been happening around there. In time, somebody came up into my tower, and I wasn't allowed to have anybody up there, but I was told this person, I don't know who they were, didn't get a name, didn't see a rank insignia, they didn't speak. They watched for probably a half hour maybe, and then they left. During that time, then we started picking up radio traffic. We got to where we could hear everything that was going on, and there was people out in the forest then trying to track down what was going on. There was a lot of radio traffic, a lot of people.
And I remember just distinctly was Lieutenant Tamplon saying, Bob, where are you? And she sounded really scared. And I remember thinking, wow, she's calling him Bob. You know, that's Sergeant Ball. Just was so scared that she forgot all protocol.
I'd been up in that tower a lot. There was no light there. There was nothing there, ever. Suddenly there is.
Now we have multiple sightings of up to 5 lights with a similar shape and all, but they seem to be steady now rather than a pulsating or glow with a red flash. We just crossed the creek, and we're getting what kind of readings there. It appears to be maybe moving a little bit this way. It's brighter than it has been. It's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
The object came into the forest, moved through the trees, obviously under intelligent control because it could have bobbed up and down and went through the trees. We tried to get closer to it. We moved up toward it, watched for a couple minutes at the edge of the forest, and it silently exploded into 5 white objects and disappeared.
But right before this happened, a small team was already in Rendlesham Forest. Other than supplying their ranks, they have all remained anonymous.
We were about halfway into the shift, I guess, when we noticed some lights in the sky that didn't seem to follow any pattern of any aircraft that we'd seen.
I found what appeared to be 3 depressions in the ground, 3 depressions in a triangular pattern, 12 foot equidistant from each other, measured from center to center.
I took the pictures, and we thought we had some evidence, but when the pictures came back, they were all whited out. There was nothing on the film itself or on the negatives.
We watched them for a while and disappeared, and the next thing what we saw was the lights in a forest, and we could see into the clearing and see a set of lights that seemed to be alternating through different color ranges.
Right now, I do believe that UFOs exist. Up until that point, I'd been skeptical. Now I believe there may have been someone else there.
Things seem to be clamped down quite suddenly, and nobody was talking to anybody else about it. And when I tried to find or ask specific questions, nobody knew anything.
And we decided to go a little bit closer to see what we could find out. And when we got closer, began to feel the hair on your arms and the back of your neck and your head, under your head even, stand on end. It's like there was a real big static charge in the air.
The anonymous sergeant was asked if he believed, as the skeptical consensus claims, that what he actually saw was just the Orford Ness Lighthouse, which is 6 miles east of the base.
I've never once seen a lighthouse that moved. And this object moved because we followed it. Under no way could that be the Orford Lighthouse.
A lighthouse doesn't move through the forest. A lighthouse doesn't go up and down, it doesn't explode, doesn't change shape, size.
About that time, we decided that we better get the heck out of there because we were getting a little too scared to stick around. And we saw some other people coming up from one of the access roads.
Those people were Lieutenant Colonel Halt, Lieutenant England, Sergeant Bustinza, Sergeant Nevels, and Master Sergeant Ball. The following recording is real and documents their pursuit.
Within 148, we're hearing very strange sounds out of the farmers' barnyard animals. They're very, very active, making an awful lot of noise.
With your feet in the air and your head on the ground.
See it too. What is it? We don't know, sir. So can I get some? Yeah, it's a strange, small red light.
Try this trick.
Pieces of it are shooting off. There is no doubt about it. This is weird.
Where is my mind?
One light to the left. Keep the flashlights on.
Where is my mind?
Here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us. Almost center. Don't check over the eye. Looking at you. Winking. Field. Now we have multiple sightings of up to 5 lights with a similar shape and orbit. We're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is unreal. It's 330 and the objects are still in the sky, although the one to the south looks like it's losing a little bit of altitude. We're turning around and heading back toward the base.
I was looking up at the Bright 2 radar. This thing was traveling so fast that instead of getting individual blips, we were getting a straight line. I could no longer see it visually. And then it appeared.
With your feet in the air and your head on the ground.
And it was right next to the window, slowing down.
Try this trick and spin it, yeah.
It was huge.
And when we got closer, we began to feel the hair on your arms and the back of your neck, your head even stand on end.
The object to the south is still beaming down lights to the ground. Over 400 hours, one object still hovering over Woodbridge Base at about 5 to 10 degrees off the horizon. Still moving erratic and similar lights and beaming down this area.
One of the light beams that came down actually penetrated through one of the bunkers. It actually burned a hole through the bunker.